let's talk about color spaces and how you can use them in your work. Now, color spaces came up for us not too long ago, and I said, hang on to that. We'll get to that in just a little while. Well, here it is. Now, there are several color spaces that I want to talk about, and as you'll recall, I said that color spaces, the different color spaces anyway, were like different languages, and they're used to describe color. I think that's a fairly decent metaphor. Now, the two color spaces that you want to primarily be concerned about are the RGB color space and the CMYK color space, although I will talk about a third method for describing color as well here in this lesson. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to get the color docker open here inside CorelDRAW, and I'm going to use the color docker to kind of help me out a little bit. So head up to your window menu all the way up at the top there, head down to Dockers, and then look for color. Okay, perfect. You should arrive here. Now, we get a panel or a docker that has some sliders in it, and also the drop-down menu here, and also some icons up towards the top. Now, from the drop-down menu, make sure that you're set to CMYK at this point, as I am, and make sure you're on the first icon. So we have Show Color Sliders, and what you should get is a C slider, an M slider, a Y slider, and a K slider. So let's talk about CMYK. Now, CMYK, or the CMYK color space, is what's referred to as a subtractive color space. It's used typically in commercial printing. So if the documents and the files that you create here in Corel are destined for commercial print production, then you'd want to make sure that your file is using CMYK colors. Now, CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. K for black, right? And I have my four sliders here. Now, what I can do is if I want to mix colors in the CMYK color space, I can use the sliders, so I can add in some cyan there if I want. I can add in some magenta, some yellow, and also some black. Now, normally, what I think of anyway, is I think of an artist mixing paint pigments on his paint palette. So he adds in a little bit of cyan, and he might mix in a little bit of magenta, and maybe he hasn't mixed in his yellow just yet. And this is the color that he would arrive at this point. Now, you'll notice that these sliders range from 0 all the way up to 100. So it's percentages, right? So what I could do, for example, is I could say, all right, let's try 70% cyan. Let's try 20% magenta. Let's try 50% yellow and see where that puts us, right? And I can look up at the top there and see what I have. So again, I think of it as an artist mixing color. Now, normally myself, what I do is I make sure that my K is at 0 and I mix using the other three values. And then if I want to tint that color just a little bit, I might add in just a little bit of black, maybe anywhere between 5 and 10. You don't want to go too high with the black because you can really get dark very quickly. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. So once again, use CMYK or cyan, magenta, yellow, and black whenever you're in a commercial print environment or a commercial print production workflow. All right, let's talk about our second color space, RGB. So what I'll do here is I'll drop down the menu at the top and I'll choose RGB. Now, even though we have a whole pile of different color spaces, again, I think it's CMYK and RGB that you really want to be concerned about. So go ahead and grab the RGB. We still have sliders here, but not as many as we had before. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop these fellas all the way down to the left. Now, RGB is used in any kind of a situation where you're building documents that are going to be viewed on screen. For example, a slideshow presentation or maybe a website, or whenever your document is going to be printed on either an office grade printer or your home printer. So don't get confused here. If you're creating documents that you're going to be printing out, but you're going to print them at home or you're going to print them on the office printer, you don't need to use CMYK. CMYK is only used in that commercial print production capacity, right? So we have R, G, and B, red, green, and blue. And rather than using percentages, these sliders use a scale from 0 to 255. Now, how I usually describe RGB is imagine this. Imagine you're standing in front of 3 giant spotlights. One spotlight is red, one is green, and one is blue. If the 3 spotlights are turned off or are set to 0 intensity, then you're going to get pure black. You're going to be standing in the dark, right? But if I take my red spotlight and I crank it up to full intensity, to full capacity, then you're going to get pure red. If I take my green spotlight and I crank him up to full capacity, you get yellow. If I take my blue spotlight and I crank him up to full intensity, you're going to be standing in pure white light. That's the idea. That's how it works. So RGB is considered an additive color space. We're adding to our colors here. So again, maybe my blue spotlight is at 100% intensity or 255 there. Red is not turned on at all, and let's say the green is at about half intensity. Well, I'm going to wind up about there. So that's how that works. I hope that makes sense for you. Okay, let's talk about one more method for working with color here inside CorelDRAW, and that is Pantone inks. Have you heard of Pantone inks or Pantone Colors? Try this. Try clicking on this icon here, Show Color Palettes, and that'll bring you into this area here. Now, what's a Pantone ink? Well, a Pantone ink is an ink that's used in commercial print production, and it's often used in company logos. The example I always use is Coca-Cola Red. We all know Coca-Cola Red. So I couldn't guess at Coca-Cola Red if I were designing a layout for them or designing a brochure for them. They have an actual specific Pantone color that they want to use. So what I can do is I can use this slider on the right-hand side here to go and work my way through, scroll my way through this entire Pantone color library. If you've ever worked with Pantone colors before, you know what I'm talking about. They're all numbered. For example, Pantone 1255C. The C stands for coded. And you'll see here right now I'm on my Pantone solid coded library, but there's lots of different Pantone libraries that I can work with. I can work with an uncoded library. I can work with hexachrome, coded and uncoded. There's metallics and pastels and all kinds of great stuff. So anyway, there you go. Now, if you're not doing a lot of commercial print production, I would not worry about Pantone colors. Just stick with your RGB and you'll be just fine. To change your